from his family. Cheney has passed away due to complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease, surrounded by his wife Lynn and daughters Liz and Mary. Cheney has served as vice president under George W. Bush from 2001 to 2009 and was a chief architect of the quote-unquote war on terror following the September the 11th attacks. He had played a central role in the Iraq War, later criticized for relying on faulty intelligence about weapons of mass destruction. A former defense secretary, congressman, and White House chief of staff, Cheney wielded immense influence in Washington, though his hardline policies drew widespread controversy. In later years, Cheney became a vocal critic of Donald Trump, calling him a coward and the greatest threat to the Republic, and even cast his final vote for Democrat Kamala Harris in 2024. Now we're joined by Ross Feingold. He is a political analyst and he joins us live from Taipei in Taiwan. Ross, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you as always. Of course, we've heard very kind words coming from Dick Cheney's family. However, in Washington, he was a hugely influential figure. In broad terms, how will Dick Cheney be remembered?
Certainly, the war on terror and the decision to invade Iraq at the time that the United States was already fighting a war against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan is going to be the primary thing that people remember about former Vice President Dick Cheney, notwithstanding his many, many decades in public service as a Secretary of Defense, as a member of Congress. But the most controversial and notable historical event that he was part of was the war in Iraq.
Another thing, of course, he was criticized for was his use of interrogation, etc., towards suspected terrorists in the likes which he approved in the likes of Guantanamo Bay. What more can you tell us about that, Ross?
Vice President Cheney was a proponent within the administration for aggressive forms of interrogation, and at the time the administration decided to proceed. Over time, more objections were raised. There was court cases about this. A lot of criticism from the subsequent administration of President Obama. So certainly it's something that people, looking back, they say maybe the United States shouldn't have done this, but we have to keep in mind the context. And frankly, there's no guarantee that a future administration wouldn't adapt the same tactics if the circumstances are similar. We have a president at the moment, President Trump, and makes no secret about his willingness to use aggressive tactics against suspects, for example, in the ongoing war on drugs. So certainly there was lots of criticism of those decisions, but again, a future administration might also use the same tactics.
Yes, and Ross, of course, Cheney and of course his President Bush, they were in power during 9/11, of course. How would you analyze their dealing, Cheney's dealing of that situation?
To be fair to them, I think they did what any leaders would do. They did what they had to do. Most immediate was the rescue and recovery operation on site, and we saw cooperation between local, state, and federal employees. And then very quickly, the decision to go after these terrorist organizations, most notably Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, where they were hiding in Afghanistan and other places in the Middle East. So they did what they thought was necessary to keep the United States safe. And that was their primary responsibility above any policy area, domestic foreign policy. The most important thing is to keep the American people safe. And President Bush and Vice President Cheney did what they thought was necessary.
And of course, Dick Cheney He was a vocal critic of Donald Trump, saying that he even voted against him. How much does that show that the Republican Party has changed from this old hawk era of Republican to now Trumpism?
Certainly, President Trump's views on domestic and foreign policies are the driver of Republican Party positions, whether that's in the federal government, where President Trump is the boss, or within or among Republicans in Congress. So many of the views that Vice President Cheney would have had when he was in office in the first part of this century, those are just no longer the views, no longer the prevailing views of the Republican Party. The party has clearly migrated to positions that are more populist. The views on trade have changed significantly. And even the views on intervention overseas is currently changing as well, with more Republicans being very much against that. So the party has changed, led by President Trump. So it'll be very interesting in the coming hours and coming days to see what current Republican leaders say about Vice President Cheney.
Yes, Ross, do stay with us as we have further updates to discuss. But we have some more breaking news coming in, and former US President George Bush has paid tribute to his late Vice President Dick Cheney, who died at 84. In a statement, Bush described Cheney as among the finest public servants of his generation, praising his integrity, intelligence and dedication to duty. Okay, we will of course bring you all the updates on that developing situation as well.